Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it's been a long time since I've done a last review about a compact camera by Canon. The last time I've done it was about 2 years ago when we reviewed the Canon PowerShot G7x Mark II. And now we have the third version of it already. So all the vloggers out there might be happy to hear that Canon allows you to attach now an external microphone to this camera. That's what all the people out there have been waiting for, especially the video people. Because you have an aperture of f1.8 to 2.8, which is pretty cool to get that depth of field and blurry background. You can now record your videos in 4K. You can do also time-lapse movies. You can charge this camera via USB-C. You can also do now live streaming to YouTube when you connect this camera to a local Wi-Fi network. You still have 20 megapixels, not much zoom, but however it's great for low light shots since you have that fast aperture of f1.8 to 2.8. Still Wi-Fi and Bluetooth and a great touch display which turns 180 degrees towards you, so you can vlog yourself, do a lot of selfies, and it's a touch display. One thing which is a bit annoying on this camera is that now you have a port to attach an external microphone, but you don't have a hot shoe. So you need to use something down here or on the side, or maybe you get a small cage for this camera to place a microphone next to it. So let's get started with the body. It's available in 2 different colors. Make sure to check out the silver black version as well, because that looks quite amazing. This one is the black version only. On the bottom side is the tripod mount. Next to it is the battery compartment with the NB13L battery with its capacity of 1250 milliamperes. Next to it, a slot for an SD card. Our favorite one is listed in the video description below. The body itself feels quite good and you do have a great grip on here, so it's not floating out of your hand straight away. It weighs about 300 grams. On one side you have a USB-C port to transfer files and to charge the camera via any power bank out there. And next to it a mini HDMI port. On the other side, as I told you, there's that little switch which allows you to pop up the flash, and next to it a port to attach an external microphone. And on the side where the USB-C and the HDMI port was, there's a little button which is for Wi-Fi, so from there on you can enable Wi-Fi at any time. On top there's the on and off button, next to it the zoom switch and the shutter release button, an exposure compensation if you use shutter or aperture priority, and a nice dial for manual mode, video mode, scene mode and the automatic mode. The lens is pretty amazing because it does have an aperture of f1.8 to 2.8, which is pretty cool to get that blur background, also called bokeh, to isolate the fore from the background or vice versa. And it does have an image stabilizer. One thing I noticed when I was taking some photos, the autofocus is outstanding. It's so damn quick. Once you point the camera somewhere, it's directly in focus, so it's a really good point and shoot camera for street photographers, or if you're taking photos of your kids while they're playing soccer, football, or any kind of other sport. If you run your own food blog on Instagram, this camera might be ideal for you since it does have a minimum focus distance of just 5 centimeters. So you get that blur background, you can isolate the fore from the background. With that open aperture, it's a really great combination. We come to the low light performance later on in this video. However, you can push the ISO up to 25,600. If you don't see that, go into the red menu. There you can set the minimum and the maximum ISO range. You can also set this for the automatic mode. So if you always want to take your photos in between ISO 200 or 1600, you can select it in the red menu. One thing which is a bit disappointing when it comes to video, the maximum ISO you can use is ISO 6400. If you purchase this camera, you will notice that the maximum exposure time will be at 30 seconds, the minimum at the 2000th of a second. You can also set a minimum exposure time of a 25,600 of a second if you make use of the electronic shutter. That is pretty cool for fast moving subjects such as animals, if you would like to take some photos of your kid while playing soccer or football. What I always liked about the G7X series is the touch display. It does feature a 7.5 centimeter LCD touch display, which is 3 inches. You can tilt it down, which is pretty cool once you're taking photos of a concert with that fast aperture. Pretty cool stuff, so you can see everything from below. If you hold that camera straight over a crowd, you can also turn the display over 90 degrees upwards or 180 degrees towards you. And you have a resolution of more than 1 million dots, which is still okay to control the sharpness of your photos while zooming in with your fingers. However, you don't have an electronic viewfinder, so that's not possible. However, in my opinion, the display was still bright enough to cope with daylight situations, since it does have a good brightness, and maybe in the future at some point we will have an electronic viewfinder. The following scenes were taken in automatic mode using the pop-up flash of the G7X Mark III. In my point of view, still a bit too dark. However, if you're taking photos on the next party and you need that extra bit of light, go for the flash. And if you would like to take some natural looking photos, make use of the fast aperture of f1.8 to 2.8. You can take up to 20 photos per second in RAW and in JPEG. Make sure to use a fast writing SD card. I will put my favorite one in the video description below. And if you take your photos in JPEG only, it will sound like this. Wow! The cool thing about the G7X Mark III is that you can still use the camera while the camera is buffering. That's not possible with all cameras out there, but this camera you can still use it. You can take also your photos in RAW, up to 55 photos, using the correct memory card, and that sounds like this. You can choose also the reduced RAW size, which allows you to take up to 90 photos in a RAW. And there's one new feature with the G7X Mark III, which is pretty cool. It says RAW burst mode, which allows you to take up to 30 photos and maximum 70 at once. What would I go for? Either JPEG or RAW. Let's say you have your own business running, you run a coffee shop. And you would like to take some great photos with that blur background of some cakes and some coffee. And that's the only thing you do. Take your photos in JPEG, upload them straight away to Instagram, and then use one of these filters. However, if you would like to do some more in post-editing using Adobe Lightroom or Photoshop, take your photos in RAW. Since with the G7X Mark III, it has a new codec, it's using the CR3 codec. And this camera has a great dynamic range. I was in the city and I was impressed about the neutral colors and what you can do in post with all the depth and the lights and the exposure if you take your photos in RAW. Of course, the file size is a bit bigger, however they contain more information and you convert all your RAW files into JPEG using Adobe Lightroom. So keep it simple. If you just would like to take some great photos, use JPEG only. If you would like to do some post-editing, take your photos in RAW. Dear videographers and vloggers out there, let's get to the most important spec for you. Now you can attach all kinds of external microphones to your G7X Mark III, since you do have now a mic port. One of my favorite microphones at the moment is the Rode Wireless Go, which I'm using at the moment to record this video. That's the internal microphone of the G7X Mark III. I'm recording now in 1080p with 50 frames per second. One new feature about this camera is that you have the record button now also on your touch display. So once you would like to start a video, just tap on the red dot on your screen. If you want to stop it, tap it again, because on the other side you still have that button, but that might be hard to reach. I'm recording now in 1080p, 25 frames per second, using an external microphone. In this case, it's the Rode Wireless Go. And from now on you can record your videos also in 4K with up to 30 frames per second or Full HD with, believe me or not, 120 frames per second, but only in slow motion, so there's no audio, and therefore you have to go into high frame rate in the red menu. However, if you would like to take some more fluent video, you can use Full HD with up to 50 and 60 frames per second. At the moment I'm recording in 1080p with 25 frames per second. If you see only 25 or 50 frames per second, make sure to go into the yellow menu and select NTSC instead of PAL. And then you have more frames per second. If you record your videos in 4K, that's possible up to 10 minutes, because then I think the camera gets quite hot because of all that data. If you record your videos in 720p or Full HD, that's possible up to a length of 30 minutes. One disappointing thing about the video mode that you're restricted to a maximum ISO of 6400. However, I see the point that it gets too grainy and enjoy the following scenes. By the way, you can also record now your videos in HDR, which gives you a bit of more dynamic range, especially if you have a sunny day with a lot of shadows and a lot of light. So it gives you kind of an equal dynamic instead of lots of shadows or lot of light. If you have too much light, make sure to use the internal ND filter. This camera takes awesome looking time-lapse movies. You can choose between 4K or Full HD, you can choose the interval, and the camera does the rest for you. Pretty amazing, and that's how it looks like. The camera allows you to use some filters straight onto your final footage, not in RAW, just in JPEG only, like fisheye, black and white, HDR. It's nothing special, so all the manufacturers out there are doing it, but Canon does it in a way which is like kind of sleepy, you know, that they don't invent something new. Whereas with other manufacturers, the filters are looking more stunning, they have some star effect in there. But using Canon filters is like, oh well, we have seen that already for 5 years and there's nothing new to it. Controlling the camera using your phone is pretty amazing. I haven't seen any manufacturer out there who does it in a more intuitive way than Canon. So the app is really nice and easy to use. You can back up your files. However, it's not possible to back up any RAW files, just JPEG. You can do remote controlling using your phone. And you can transfer the files also in full resolution, however JPEG only, straight onto your phone and share it with friends. This camera is also great for taking photos. The image quality is great. However, most people probably would struggle with the ISO, the shutter speed and the aperture. If you know how to control these 3 essential elements in photography, you know exactly how to blur out the background, how to take a macro photo. It's all about these 3 essentials. By the way, there will be a big video on my channel where I explain you all these things so you can control also this camera in the near future. I was a bit confused since Canon says that you can charge this camera also using the USB-C port. I tried using my power bank, I tried using my phone charger, I tried to use a different charger, and it didn't work. I see that there is a little LED which is supposed to illuminate, I think, in orange, and it didn't. So the only way how I was able to charge this camera was using the normal charger. It might be that the camera is broken, however it's a pretty new camera and it shouldn't be broken. So let me know about your camera, if you're using it, is it charging or not? I guess some people out there might be happy to hear your answer about that. Let's make a cut here. For whom is this camera made? If you travel a lot, it's a great camera. If you need a lot of zoom, it's not the proper camera for you. If you want a camera where you can play with the depth of field, it's a pretty amazing camera. Since you can go from f1.8 to 2.8, which is the aperture, which allows you to blur out the fore or the background. It's nice for taking portrait pictures, and the photos are super sharp. You can take them now in RAW CR3, which is good if you would like to do some post editing. I mean, most people out there expecting a screen like that. It's really sensitive, the colors are neutral, it's nice to control the sharpness, it's really nice for vlogging, and that is a nice vlogging camera. And I guess it doesn't take too long until the first one is producing a cage for this camera to attach an external microphone, since this camera is just made for vloggers out there. And I was wondering why I can record in 4K without any crop factor while using my Canon EOS R or any other Canon out there. With all of them, they have a crop factor of 1.7, 1.8 something for more than 2K, while this camera only costs 600 to 700 euros or US dollars. So that's a bit confusing. This camera does offer a lot of features like time-lapse in 4K or 1080p, slow motion with up to 120 frames per second. Not even my Canon EOS R is doing it, so it confuses me a lot. The usability is great. The menu is made for people who are starting with photography. If you're using a Canon camera already, it's nice because it's the same menu on all Canon cameras. While we were using the camera, I was not able to take more than 300 photos because, like, you know, the screen is running once you take a photo, then you take a video, and in general it's something in between like 100 photos and a couple minutes of video, so make sure to get a second battery. I hope you enjoyed watching this review. If you have any further questions, please make sure to post a comment below. Don't forget to subscribe, and you will find lots of sample images in the video description below. All the best from Frankfurt, and see you soon.